Having control of your finances is a hallmark of sovereignty. National heroes, generally, are shown on banknotes, and the money is a visiting card of your country. What are we to make of Ukraine's recent monetary name change, the latest de-Russification move? It may be a small matter, changing the name of your currency, but it's a sign of who you are. Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has not only reshaped the geopolitical landscape, but also ignited a profound transformation within Ukrainian society. Over the 3 decades of its independence, Ukraine has balanced between strengthening ties with Russia and expressing European aspirations while distancing itself from its eastern neighbor's legacy. The first attempt at partial decommunization occurred right after the USSR's collapse, removing communist ideology from school and university programs. Another significant effort took place during Viktor Yushchenko's presidency between 2005 and 2010, focusing on commemorating the Great Famine and recognizing the contributions of nationalist formations like OUN-UPA in Ukraine's fight for independence. Another wave was initiated by the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Ukraine passed laws to legally frame decommunization. This process involved the removal of Soviet-era symbols, renaming streets and cities, and revisiting historical narratives to emphasize Ukraine's distinct national identity. The Russian invasion in 2022 served as a catalyst for a more comprehensive de-Russification effort. The brutality of the conflict united Ukrainian society and government in a shared determination to eradicate Russian influence from all spheres of life. This included the outlawing of pro-Russian political parties, the removal of Russian historical figures and symbols from public spaces, and the exclusion of the Russian language and culture from educational curricula and public discourse. Ukrainian cities have been renaming streets and squares to honor national heroes and historical events. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate has faced a crisis, with efforts to sever ties with Moscow gaining momentum. This cultural renaissance is accompanied by a resurgence of national pride and a renewed emphasis on Ukrainian symbols, historical figures, and cultural heritage.
My guest today is Maria Piechowska from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Welcome to the programme.
Hello.
This idea of de-Russifying at least the nomenclature of the Ukrainian currency, that'll be our topic for today. What's the background to this? We've heard about the change in the religious authority in the Orthodox Church. Is this just another step in this de-Russifying everything?
I believe so. It's one of the steps of a really broad, I would say, movement in Ukraine. It started out just after invasion. Before, they were not so, I would say, they were more reluctant to change things. Right now, they just understood that Russia is their enemy, so they want really to get rid of everything what connects them to Russia. So the coin, the name of the coin is one of the things, but it's in everything. I mean, it's from the statues on the streets, from the name of the streets, even in the name of the cities, they change it.
The kopeck or the kopieyek is now shach. Well, what's the correct pronunciation, first of all, and what's the origin of this word?
So maybe we just start from beginning. So there is a hryvnia, and hryvnia is divided into 100 kopiyok.
Yeah.
But this word kopiyok, it's actually from Russian. And there is just the discussion. It's not, as far as I know, it's not decided yet, but they want to change the name. And they started to think how to change the name, what should be the new name for this kopijka. And they found out very old name. It's even in the first sources are from the 16th century, but there was a small coin called szach.
Was this a Ukrainian coin, or bearing in mind 16th century? Was it Polish? Was it Muscovite? Was it Ottoman?
I mean, this coin was used in Poland, but Ukraine was part of Poland then, but it was just we can't say it's a Polish name or a Polish coin. It was just used on this territory of Ukraine right now, and it's very interesting because there are two theories what the name comes from, and the official Ukrainian version is that it comes from a very old Slavic word from a very small part of something. And the other theory is that it comes from the Polish word szelong, which was the old coin used in Poland, but it's a word that comes from Germany shilling. And we know that a lot of countries in Western Europe knows the
yes, the
currency shilling.
Yes, shillings, now euros. Is this a means of reaching to the past and looking for an identity which perhaps didn't exist then?
I wouldn't say it didn't exist. I mean, Ukrainians are right now trying to show the world that, and to themselves too, of course, that their history is starts very long time ago. It's very rich, and especially it's a kind of opposition to Russian narration, because Russia forgets that actually there was no Russia Moscow state when already Ukrainian or Kiev Rus was already there. So Ukrainians are trying maybe to emphasize this, to show the world and to themselves, because we have to remember that a lot of Ukrainians they finished Soviet schools, so they didn't really learn this in a school. So they're also kind of discovering their own history right now. They've got this new Shah. What are the next steps? What they have their target against? They've got the battle for history. They're toppling the statues of old Russian czarists, that kind of thing. What else is on the cards really for this sort of process? You have your own currency, you have your own heroes, you have your own names, nomenclature for this. What's next? I would say that they need something like a whole new narration, because for a long time, like, history was written in Russia for them. So they were taught that they are part of Russian history, and they were also taught that Poland, for example, was an enemy. And right now there's the shift. They still are not on the moment when they can say Poland was a friend, because it's not really true. We had good moments and bad moments. But they are in the moment when they say, okay, Russia narration is bad. We have to look for our own narration. And I think, I'm not talking about historians, because among Ukrainian historians it happened a long time ago, but just common people. If you look at the YouTube, and there are like very popular channels like The Real History of Ukraine or something like this. It's very popular, and they all shows this new narration that we have our own history. Russia narration is not our, and we are trying to create new one.
What about this division between the East and the West? Is this a movement that's coming chiefly from Western Ukrainian intellectuals? There's a strong, shall we say, Russian affinity in the east of Ukraine. Where is this idea of de-Russification coming from? Do the Easterners not like this idea of...
It's not really happening anymore. I mean, it was so for a long time. It was this Western narration, Eastern narration. And right now, and it's one of I would say one of the biggest achievements of Putin. He united Ukraine. There is no Eastern narration right now. There's no Western narration. There is just one narration. And this diversification things, I mean, you don't have to really diversify Lviv. It's already nothing fair. But if you think about Odessa or Eastern Ukraine, yes, you have to diversify them, and they do it by themselves. I mean, people from Odessa, for example.
Some of the statues that were toppled here in Warsaw, for example, some of the post-Soviet or the Soviet huge muscular statues. When I looked at this, I thought, well, aren't they removing a vital piece of Polish history? We may not like it, but it was there. Is that the danger of doing this same process in Ukraine? For example, Lviv used to be Lvov. They're not really too hot on the Polish presence there. The tour guides took me around and were able to talk about the Austrian presence. But the Poles were kind of marginalised. Is this a thing that happens in this kind of reinventing the past process?
I mean, I think that right now it's very emotional, so they do a lot of things, but there of course is coming one moment when you have to start to think what we are doing. And of course, for example, when we think about Warsaw, we destroyed a lot of monuments, but for example, we are not going to destroy Soviet cemetery because it's cemetery, so we don't do such a things. But there is a huge board with history written there, and it's I believe good way. Of course, it's not like you have to destroy some things, especially if they're in the center of a city or something like this. But on the other hand, you have to remember it's part of your history. But right now, I don't want to judge Ukrainians because it's emotional for them and they have every right to be emotional about it.
The next step is what? What next is for the de-Russification? What's the next concrete target?
There's still a lot of name of streets. There's still a lot of monuments that they need to be rethink because it's always very hard to say. For example, in the art, you have artists that were grown up in Ukraine, but then they moved to Russia, and now we have to answer the questions, or Ukrainians have to answer the question: who are those artists? Are they Russians or Ukrainian? And it's very huge discussion right now about it in Ukraine because they are really angry that in a lot of world museums where Ukrainian artists that are there is a description that they're Russian, which is actually not true. But you have to make this line, who is Ukrainian and who is Russian, which is quite difficult when you had for so long this Russian narration that everything is Russian. And of course, it's about identity of those people. It's very hard to make this line, but we are trying. I mean, there are a lot of research and we are trying to do it.
When do we see a modern Ukraine emerging? Obviously now it's being redefined by Vladimir Putin. He's actually defined the nation and the state. But moving back to history, when did the idea of Ukraine become a reality? When could a modern Ukrainian look back and to what time they say, well, this was us before was Poland, Muscovite, Ottomans? When do you think it became a specific Ukrainian identity?
It was like in this part of Europe, it was half of 19th century, of course, especially when new literature was started, written in Ukrainian. So Shevchenko is the most well-known. But it was like, I would say, it was kind of modern identity, but with inclination to be a folk identity. And right now, actually in 90s, we had this huge reveal of this new identity. I don't want to say that there was no modern identity in, 60s, for example, when there was a lot of amazing artists and people who wrote about Ukrainian identity. But something which was, for me, very important, what happened in 90s, for example, when we talk about the language, there appeared writers who started to write with completely modern language, with a language that didn't try to be like very sophisticated. They just wrote. And it was, for me, the beginning of something like a new Ukraine. And now, what we have now, it's very important because even if we don't talk about high culture and things like that, but right now Ukraine is united. And of course, Ukrainians say that they speak Ukrainian, but there's a huge group of Ukrainians who speak Russian, even if now it's not so easy to speak Russian in Ukraine. But this part of they are also part of Ukraine, and this is a kind of this Ukrainian culture which is united, but it doesn't mean that it's homogeneous.
Is it a modern Ukrainian culture, as you say, is not a homogeneous culture? What are the motives? What are the motifs rather that they look for? Is it a folk peasant motif, or do they look to the intellectuals in the big cities?
I would say both. I mean, there's a lot of like this, I would say, folk peasant culture, which we can see, for example, by the popularity of soroczka, so this, or wyszywanka, so this amazing women cloths. But and it's a huge part of culture, but it's only part of it. And right now we see just normal city culture as well. So it's not like 100% of this, I would say, peasant culture.
Thank you very much for coming on, Maria Piechowska. Thank you very much for coming on to our programme. Great to have you. So that's all we had time for today. Join us next time, please, for How We Got Here.